Entering the Pat Mayo Experience.
Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings. Smash a like and sub to the channel while you're here, and if you want to get into a draw for $500, the minimum is $500 at the moment. We get 100 new reviews, another $500. 200 new reviews, another $500. So we can ladder this up in terms of giveaways. But if you subscribe, rate, and review the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast on Apple or Spotify or wherever you download your podcast, you can screenshot me the Spotify ones if you want. Then you're in that draw. Leave your Twitter handle or email in that review, and boom, you are good to go. Winners coming week 2 on the DraftKings show on the Pat Mayo Experience. So you got 2 weeks to do this, all right? Thank you. Justin Freeman from runthesims.com is joining me right now. There are new tools, and we're going to talk about why tools is something you need for NFL DFS. I'm also, if you've already watched it, I've done a show with Tambo and Hoop about the strategy behind it, but like, how do you make your picks? What tools are important to construct your lineups to help you try to win money? And Justin, you've built the tools, anything you need over at Run the Sims, right?
I don't know about that, but we are coming a long ways. We've made a lot of progress since we put this thing together 2 years ago, Pat. This is our third NFL season coming up this year, and tools get a little bit better every year, a little bit sharper behind the curtain, a little easier user experience on the front end. So everybody seems to be pretty happy with the direction we're heading in, and I'm one of those folks.
Yeah, of course. Code Mayo gets you 10% off at runthesims.com, in case you were wondering. But let's jump into the tools right now, because I want to kind of show them off and how to use them, like the standard optimizer. You have the projection system. You have the rangefinder player by player. And then you have the super new tool that's coming up this season as well. So let's walk it through. Like baseline, I want to make some lineups this week. What do I do, Justin?
Yeah, well, I think like the first thing to keep in mind is Showdown versus Classic slates. I mean, those are really the two cream of the crop DFS formats, and we can kind of focus on using some of the examples this upcoming week 1. Obviously, rosters are currently in flux. Everything's sort of subject to change here for now, so we won't dig in too deep on the projections. Maybe we'll talk about those next week. But yeah, overall, like we've created this tool called the RTS Sim Runner, and this is a pretty neat thing where it gives you control over customizable inputs for every player on every team, really every data point that you could possibly imagine. And then we run simulations play by play through every game 10,000 times, or at least that used to be the case. And now we've ratcheted up that computing ability by quite a bit. So now even on our Showdown slates, that number is more like 50,000 times that you'll have access to. And essentially what we're going to do is find the best possible lineups that we can give to you. And the Showdown is one of those games where obviously we want to play large field showdown contests. They're extraordinarily top heavy. If you're not first, you're last, truly, when it comes to Showdown. We want to find ways that we can reduce our duplicates, but overall, we want to make high quality lineups. And so we've made that hopefully as easy as possible, like literally a click of the button away. So you just click Run the Sims, and then all of a sudden you're going to get a screen that looks a lot like this, which is custom lineups based on the inputs of your simulations. And so in this case, we ran 50,000 lineups. And you see that the top lineup here on the board appeared 166 times. And we can kind of look through and get some data points about this particular lineup. Obviously, injury flags across the board, but like say Kadarius Toney, who's a little bit iffy for week 1. We'll get some more information next week. But you can kind of see here, like how many projected points does this lineup score? What's the ownership for this lineup looking like? Is it highly owned, low or low owned? What does that mean in terms of predicted duplication? So like this lineup, pops 166 times out of 50,000, but it's going to be duped by quite a bit. So is that enough to offset? So we've given you quite a bit of information to be able to build Showdown lineups really like easily with the click of a button. You just click download CSV and you toss them right into DraftKings. It couldn't be much easier than that. We also then offer the ability for players to go in and get the types of lineups we want. We have this new advanced filters screen that I'm pretty excited about, where you can kind of create your own custom rules in terms of what you're expecting for how you want to approach this particular slate. Like if you want to get rid of all the quarterback captain lineups, you can do that right here by just saying do not allow quarterback captain. Or if you want to make sure that every lineup contains 2 running backs from the same team because you think that's how you're going to get different, you can require that as a rule right there. So there's a lot of ways that you can take this lineup, these sets of lineups, and make them look like ones that you're interested in playing.
So we are going to break down the Thursday Night Football Showdown contest, me and you, sometime next week. And I should let people know at runthesims.com right now, if you make a free account, just an email, you will have the Showdown Thursday Night Football opening game tools available to you. You do not have to pay for that one. So, trial by error. You go in, test it out, see if you like runthesims.com enough to go do it, and those tools will be available for you right now. If you're listening to the audio version of the show, I highly recommend that you go switch to the video version up on the Mayo Media Network YouTube page so you can see all of this on the screen as sort of a walkthrough. But we'll cover more Showdown strategy in depth a little bit more on that show. Let's switch over to the classic slate and the tools that we can use for that when constructing our lineups. I talked a lot with Tambo and Hoop about how I'm kind of out of the business of playing 50 lineups, 150 lineups. I'm just going to try to make like 5 really good lineups a week, maybe 3, playing some 3-max, some single entries. That's where I had all of my success last year and the year before, so that's what I want to do. So when I'm researching everything, that doesn't mean I don't want to optimize lineups and see what comes through them. What's the best way to walk through this, especially if I have particular takes on games and I want to adjust things?
Yeah, exactly. So there's really 2 different ways that you could possibly create classic slate lineups, say for the DraftKings main slate at Run the Sims. The first I'll go through here is the Sim Runner. So not only can Sim Runner do Showdown lineups, it can also do classic slate lineups. And Sim Runner allows you to be able to create your own custom projections sort of on the fly. And you'll see the default values that we have here. We've got every game sort of loaded across the top. We can dive into any one of these if we have a particular take. One conversation that people are having right now is possibly around the backfield in Chicago. So why don't we just click into this Green Bay Chicago game, and you'll see that we can amend all of these different values for all the players for Green Bay. I scroll down and do the same thing for Chicago. And so I tend to believe that Khalil Herbert is the number 1 running back in this particular offense, but would it surprise anyone if Roschon Johnson or Deontay Foreman walked away with the lead? It wouldn't for me. So maybe in this particular case, you think that Khalil Herbert's a little bit more of a backup. He's more in the 15% rushing market share, and Roschon Johnson's actually the lead back, 37% market share. And then we could adjust our touchdown numbers across the board as well there. I'll just make that kind of 15 and 28 and flop those there as well. So now we've created a situation where, at least rushing wise, Roschon Johnson is the guy we think is going to do well. And basically all we would have to do is re-click our button up here to Run the Sims, and then we will get fresh lineups that would reflect that. And, when you get to, once you click Run the Sims button, you'll get a screen that looks a lot like this. It's basically a summary of every player in the player pool compared to how often, what their sort of projected ownership looks like and how optimal they are in your lineup. So you can make decisions sort of on an individual basis and say, well, it looks like Justin Jefferson may be a smidge overowned. Maybe he's not a guy I want to play. Javonte Williams showing a little bit of value there. Maybe he's a guy I want to force in. So if you're hand building, that's a great tool for you. Or you can just go straight to the custom lineup screen and be able to view all the lineups that were created. And you can kind of see here's a lineup with Trevor Lawrence in it. It's a naked Trevor Lawrence lineup, and it's got a bunch of Broncos. And so it's sort of sorted here currently by projected points, and those Broncos are all looking like values. And so you can go in and screen through and filter through those lineups and sort of see what populates towards the top. And we can talk through some strategies a little bit later about how to really dig in and get the types of lineups you want to out of SimRunner. But that's one of the 2 different ways that you can make the lineups, and the other is the classic optimums.
Yeah, so the thing I really like about this screen, too, if you just click over to your projections, I like to go in and kind of fudge around with everything. And this is how I started creating my rankings last year, which were far more accurate for the first time ever. That you can go in player by player and make these adjustments of whatever you want. And then whether it's for season long, whether it's for player props, whatever it might be, I can run all these simulations on the games to try to get like if I think this is going to be the outcome of the game, or at least this is going to be the most average outcome of what's going to happen, and I think that, like you just mentioned, like Roshan Johnson over Khalil Herbert, if that's something that I believe in, I don't, by the way, just for the record, then I can go in and now look at the projections of those players to see what it spits out for me. I find that just to be a very valuable tool to get an assessment for the week. And even like when you can go player by player, and I think one of the examples that I used with Tambo and Hoop is that in week 1, everyone's going to use Chris Olave. Calvin Ridley is exactly the same price, but at far more depressed ownership. That if I can go in and look at the player projections for each of them, or even use the range finder of how many times Ridley is going to outscore Olave, that maybe that's just a pivot I'll blindly make because their projection actually turns out to be quite similar, or potentially hugely off, but I can go do all that research myself now.
Exactly right. Yeah. And so that's what I love about these tools is that it can give you an answer to the test if that's really what you want. But more than anything, it will help you identify sort of where the strengths and weaknesses lie with any player or with any lineup, and being able to isolate sort of where those fragile situations exist and sort of how that sausage is made. And being able to look behind the curtain, I think, is extremely helpful to build the right types of lineups, especially if you are a hand builder. I don't think this is a tool just for 150 max type players. I think you're getting a lot of data points here to help you make that like subjectively objective decision, even when you're building by hand.
Can you bring up the rangefinder for a second? Because I love using this tool to help me make my decisions, because I can see the downside, I can see the upside, and I can just very easily go player by player or 2 player by 2 player, whatever it might be. Let's see. Can you bring up Ridley versus Olave week 1? Okay, so now we can take a look at, it doesn't really matter what the betting line is here, but this is a great tool for props at the same time, that if you want to punch in whatever the prop is for the week and whatever stat. Obviously you're not going to find a lot of places to bet on DraftKings fantasy points, but if you want to put in receiving yards or receptions, you can really see the range of outcomes. So a median projection for Calvin Ridley is going to be 12.9%, and that's, I'm just looking at like even the graph for 25 points, like it's not that long. Like, that's within the range of outcomes. So can you put in Chris Olave as well? So 54 receiving yards for Calvin Ridley. That does seem a bit low. I'm guessing Olave's is going to be like 65, something like that. Would that sound right?
Wow, 78 for us. And I'm bullish there on Olave. And I think part of that is, just to talk a little football for a second, that Olave is really locked into a role that we know is like super, super legit, with not a ton of other options existing in that offense. Whereas the Jags, like it's so feasible for a player to just go missing for an extended period of time when you have 3 pretty good receivers and a tight end and a running back who catches a lot of passes as well.
So we've went through the general tools that you can use, be it with the prop market, your DraftKings lineups for both Showdown and in the classic slates. And we'll have every single slate up there as well. If there's a 2-game slate, a 4-game slate, you'll be able to generate your lineups. And you want to play the late-only slates, you'll have those available on runthesims.com. But you have created a new tool this year, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it, but it is a separate product from it costs more money to use this product, right?
Yeah, it does. And so we'll be rolling out pricing on that here in the next couple of days. We'll likely launch it Monday of game week. And so you'll be able to opt in there. But this is an additional add-on product called SimRunner Pro. And so I'm excited to kind of go behind the curtain to show you what you see there. And essentially, let me just sort of explain what's happening here. We take those, in this particular case, we ran 50,000 simulations of a Showdown slate, Lions at Chiefs, and we got 50,000 lineups that could have won a DraftKings contest. Of course, several of them were duplicated, and that's information we use to sort of help us out. And so what we do with SimRunner Pro is we say, hey, what if the lineups that we just created just so happen to represent the field that we were playing in? Now, let's create a Royal Rumble of sorts between all of those lineups and see which ones would have made more money over the course of another 1,000 simulations. And so we take all those lineups and throw them in the ring together and just figure out after each simulation, how much money did they make in a GPP? And then so we're returning each lineup with a positive or negative EV value associated with it. So let's just talk about this top lineup on the screen. It's a Patrick Mahomes lineup with his kicker, with 3 pass catchers, and Khalif Raymond, the only Lion. And you see the salary is $47,300. It obviously is a super high floor lineup. It contains Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, which is going to be super popular, and with Mahomes and the captain. And it's just like a traditionally well-built lineup. It's got quarterback captain with 3 pass catchers. But like the fact that it's a 5-1 build, meaning 5 Chiefs and 1 Lion, the fact that it does leave $2,700 on the table, it gives us some clues about what we're going to expect with how many duplicates are expected in that particular contest. And this actually ends up being a super profitable lineup. You know, there are some dupes, and that's okay, because the sort of floor on this lineup is so strong. It finishes in the top 0.1% 8 times more often than it should. It finishes in the top 0.1% almost a full 1% of the time, 0.8%. It finishes in the top 1%, 2.6% of the time, and it cashes in the money. ITM means it cashes about 41% of the time, which is fantastic, which means it's got a lot of outs to being profitable. It can be out on sort of like the min cash side, or it can give you an out in terms of actually winning the whole dang thing, which is super helpful and swings the EV quite a lot. So that's kind of a sort of an understanding of what you'll get with this particular product, is like a true EV for if these lineups all happen to be playing each other in the same context.
Listen, I want to sit here and sell this to everyone in the world saying like, you need this, but everyone doesn't need this tool, right? This is a very high level product for people that are playing a lot of volume in a lot of lineups. Like, would this help me if I'm playing one entry into a $100 contest?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like, this is not a tool for everyone. This is a tool akin to what you'll see professional DFS players using behind the scenes. Obviously, theirs will have a little less interface on top of it. Usually they're running that in like a Python script or something like this. But the guys who are tied to their keyboards on Sunday mornings, this is the type of stuff that they're using. And so, yeah, it's good. This product is naturally going to price out a lot of people, and that's fine. I will say, you do not need this tool, especially this add-on, to win. Like, you can still win the old-fashioned way. In fact, most people still will. This is just an additional tool for folks who are grinding a bit more seriously and maybe have a aspirational goals of sort of approaching this from more of a professional or semi-professional type of lens. And so I think the price point you'll see will reflect that.
And when you have the buttons up top, like payout structure and plus EV players, what really goes into that? Like, I like this idea of like, because I even talked about, like, I don't like playing in tournaments with 50,000 plus people. I like playing in like the 1,000 entrants. I think that's a great tool to have here that can really help me out as well.
Exactly. And so, I mean, all of these tools are designed for GPPs. There's not a lot of cash tools here for you, but essentially you get to choose a payout structure that looks more similar to the contest that you're playing in. So if you're playing in the red zone, for example, that has a pretty flat payout structure. In other words, like first place, the difference between first place and 10th place isn't gigantic like the Millie Maker or something like that is. You can sort of choose a field size that matches what you're looking for. And so you'll see that the sort of top heavy tiered down nature is less dramatic between, say, like that top 0.1% and even the sort of second 0.2% type outcomes. So yeah, you can sort of match this up with the type of contest you're interested in playing, because sometimes, like, if you're in a pretty flat payout structure, you don't need to go like super off the board. Like, we want the lineups that do have a good high floor, but also have a really direct path towards winning. So it just helps you to get a balance, sort of a balance there. When it comes to advanced settings, like we have these pretty locked in at this point, and just sort of gives you a taste of some of the things that we're looking at adding here throughout the course of the season. Where basically, I mentioned that all of the lineups that we create are pitted against one another, but we will eventually offer an option that allows you to match sort of the expected ownership of a particular contest. And so there's lots of different advanced settings that we'll get into later. And again, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, what? I don't even know what any of these words mean, then it's probably not the product for you. Like I said, this is for a sort of a more really intense type of DFS player. And then the plus EV players list gives you if you're sort of looking at hand building, this is about as clear of a way as you could possibly look at it, where you say, like, most players are going to be minus EV because they have to at least overcome a rake in order to be plus EV. And so we really only have maybe a dozen players there on this list that look like they are still positive EV. And so it helps return an EV calculation on every player on the slate, which is super helpful. And even on the classic slates, that helps you dig in and identify who are key players that we want to be able to build in.
Okay, so we're going to dig in more to the Thursday night football game, Detroit and Kansas City, on the pick show for that, and we'll try to use some of these simulations to help create a lineup. But I just want to say thanks for doing all of these fantastic tools. And I think that, the market was getting very competitive. And I think that the Run the Sims tools not only offer what other people are offering, but way more now as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we have something for every price point, for type of player. We've got a lot of stuff that's still free on our site. A lot of ways that you can gain a lot of edges with literally no cost. And then we have a lot of products as well that are right in that sweet spot of where we think is competitive. And then we've added this on top too for that really serious type of player. So I think we do have something for everyone. And I hope everyone will come join us this year. There's lots of great ways to get involved. We've got a Discord that loves to kind of talk through the plays of the week, identify those prop bets and that sort of thing. That's no cost as well. So hop on in there, guys.
All right, runthesims.com. You can use code MAYO right now to go get yourself 10% off. The Showdown tools will be free for the Thursday night football game to open the season. Then they go behind the paywall. So if you do want to test them out, go to runthesims.com right now and create a free account. Thanks to Justin for being on the show. You can follow him at Justin Freeman 18 on Twitter and get into that Discord. Lots happening on the Run the Sims Discord. At least it has been. It was pretty spicy during spring football season too this year. Can't imagine the kind of hype it's going to have for this NFL season. So come join the community at runthesims.com, code Mayo. All right, smash the like while you're here, sub to the channel, and that will do it for us. I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!